Hello and welcome. We have just celebrated Independence Day, and a timely book has come out on India's economic landscape by former Director General of the CAG of India, Mr. P. Sage Kumar. What in CAG ought to be auditing? What no CAG what it ought to be auditing, and this is the second book, a sequel to his first book, also on the CAG. So to begin with, Mr. Kumar, what made you write a sequel to your first book, and what do you expect from your book?
See, a couple of questions were nagging my mind for the last maybe 3, 4 years, if not more, especially with regard to the independence, the quality of reports, the timeliness of reports, and the efficacy of the CAG in enforcing public financial accountability in the recent years. This was occasioned because of some internal developments, number one in CAG, which were not very unpleasant to hear, especially for people who have worked for more than 30 years in the department and have some pride and achievements which they recount. That is number one. Number two, there were a lot of other developments, other than internal, external developments are also over there. See, for example, reports are highlighted or rather magnified only in a partial manner, which raising the issues which suit the story for the media, which are very active these days. And the CAG's actual role and its own findings get lost and sidetracked, and some other issues get magnified. Political twists are also given. Unfortunately, CAG establishment office reports are get drawn into it. Number three, CAG is a publicity reticent department, if I may say so. They don't come with whether timely or active press conferences. Only very recently, about 2 months back, two deputy CAGs, serving deputy CAGs, I think, which in my memory, the first time, they gave a press conference explaining what exactly CAG is proposing to do, what are its internal procedures, how it is modernizing. That's a very welcome step. But apart from that, there was all negative sentiments, some going to the extent of saying that CAG is dormant, CAG is sleeping, or some saying that CAG has been made silent. So in this background, I thought, let me analyze exactly what CAG ought to have been auditing, following up on my first sequel, which was a critical assessment of CAG. See, where CAG, I thought, in my own humble way, where I felt it, there was a lot to desire, no, where a lot of things to improve. A lot of things did not happen in the way probably it should have. So that was the first part. The second part, after is a natural question, Okay, you have pointed out what is wrong with CAG or what, in according to you. No, according to you, please tell us what CAG should have been auditing and why it is not been auditing. So that naturally took me to the sequel. And it unfortunately grew to about 600 pages. But I must tell you here, see, CAG is such a vast department. I have not covered railways, defense procurement, central public sector enterprises, infrastructure, so many subjects, see, which CAG is dealing with are not forming part of this book. So it's a vast gamut of subjects under CAG. So I restricted myself to about 25 select subjects, which I, in my own view, thought that would be very important subjects for what we can call it as all India performance audits. And I tried to provide 2, 3 areas, some checklists also. That is how the second book came.
Says Ji, let's tell our audience that it's going to be not a technical discussion about a financial matter. It's going to be a discussion about India's democracy, a functional democracy. What should India be doing now that we are celebrating 75 years of the Constitution? So, says Ji, please tell us what is the role of the CAG in protecting the democracy of India? How CAG should be upholding democracy of India?
See, I had mentioned in my first book the much repeated, often quoted quote of no less than Baba Saheb Ambedkar ji, who says
Yes.
that CAG is perhaps the most important single officer of the Constitution. The context was slightly different. He said CAG has to ensure that the expenditure meets with the sanctions approved by the Parliament. In simple words. But the scope of CAG's role has extended far beyond. If we proceed from 1950 to now 2012, if I may have that as cutoff, see, Supreme Court has then decided that CAG is not a mere munim. He is not an accountant. So he can do performance audits and hold the government to accountable through his reports. Of course, they have to go to the parliament and public accounts committees examine. So that is his role. He has to examine all receipts, all expenditure that goes out of consolidated fund approved by parliament, how efficiently, economically, and effectively that expenditure has been used, and what are the outcomes? How has the public benefited? Is there any misuse, abuse, pilferage, frauds? All these things he is supposed to bring out in his reports. So that is how he will ensure accountability. That is how he will protect or promote the sense of accountability of the executive to parliament in our democracy.
So that is the bottom line. Accountability of the executive that can only be fixed by parliament, and the CAG is a helping tool for India's parliament to do its job, and the CAG is a kind of an aid to the Indian parliament. Says G, people may think that the CAG just checks how the money has been spent, but there are stories that tell that because of the efforts of the CAG, many positive things have happened. For example, the rhinos in Kaziranga in Assam are happily roaming their territories, all because of the proactive role played by the CAG. Can you please tell us the story that you have very illuminatingly mentioned in the book?
See, that is one instance in my memory where the CAG has gone a little bit out of the way in a very positive manner. For example, sitting with the forest guards, examining the passing of vehicles, examining how these rangers work in the nights and what are the constraints. So after observing, after coordinating with the field level functionaries, CAG has come to certain very practical recommendations, which even the judiciary appreciated and the executive appreciated. And that way, the reports are that, I don't know, this is about 10 years old or more than 10 years old report. What is the status right now about rhino poaching? But at least 3-4 years after the report was tabled in the legislature, the rhino poaching indeed had come down. So that is one of the very rare positive features of the report, which is entirely because of an exceptional senior audit officer under the guidance of a very senior IA&AS officer who was a deputy CA. So this happened perhaps as an exception, not as a rule.
In fact, that CAG report, as you have mentioned in the book, has become a template for conservation. Others have also adopted those recommendations, as well as co-opting the villagers in the conservation efforts.
Correct.
So that was a positive example, says G. Let's take a negative example. Why did we not audit properly the demonetization? And critics say that the Indian economy is still suffering because of the ill effects of the hurriedly decided demonetization.
See, the demonetization exercise is quite old now. How, about 7 years old now?
Yes.
And
Yes.
or even more. See, so that's a very old exercise, 2016, isn't it? So now 9 years have passed. So it's too late to now think about demonetization audit by CAG. Yes, during that time, after 1 or 2 years of that, the then CAG had very actively considered that the CAG should take up the audit of the entire exercise of demonetization. But for some reasons, unknown reasons, not in the public domain, nobody in the CAG really knows why it was not taken up. The CAG had given 2 interviews also in national newspapers that he is going to take up, but then subsequently it fizzled out. See, we should remember that CAG has a very unique role. He's just not an aid to government. He has the freedom to decide what is the scope, manner, and extent of audit he will do on a given scheme, subject, expenditure, or a receipt to the government. So it is in his wisdom, and nobody can question him on that, theoretically. But practically, yes, that was a very significant opportunity for CAG to have examined and come out with his own recommendations. But proponents of demonetization will say demonetization was not a scheme. There were no declared objectives. and it had to be a secretive operation, otherwise it would not have been success. So many things people say, and now it is too late to, I think, go beyond it. But I cited that as an example of how CAG should have intervened, and why CAG has not come out, why he had not carried out that audit. Now it is too late to do anything about it.
On that very point, as you have said, it's too late. You have also examined the issue that the CAG is somehow taking up certain audit works which are delayed, much delayed, and you have argued that the CAG should take up the audit works timely and come out with the report promptly, so that the time lag doesn't diminish the importance of the recommendations or the findings.
Correct. Correct.
So, what is the current situation, and why are you arguing that?
See, timeliness, if I am asked, one single problem with CAG's reports is the timeliness. See, I have in a separate post elsewhere mentioned an example very recently of CAG's report number 12 of 2025 on EVA bill system of GST. See, the period covered is up to March 2022. So it came about 3 years late. Number two, the sample selected is suspect. It doesn't yield to any satisfactory conclusion as to the nature of the defects or the extent of defects that CAG has pointed out. Of course, CAG has pointed out about 800 crores worth of irregularities, but compared to the 15 lakhs crore per year GST turnover, it doesn't indicate whether it's a systemic problem or it's an aberration. So that is one recent example. I have referred to more than 4 or 5 examples in my second book, where CAG reports have come 5 years, 6 years, sometimes 7 years, 8 years behind after the events. There is a Setu Samudram report. There is this Antrix and Devas deal. There is a Noida toll bridge company, Noida land allotments, Roshni Act in Jammu and Kashmir. Those remedial actions have been taken in these reports, but the reports could definitely have come much earlier than what they have done. So this is the delays in these cases do hamper, rather they cast a gloom on the impact of the CAG's report, dilute the impact of the CAG's reports.
So, delay in auditing dilutes the impact of the report, as CAG is saying. And for the benefit of the listeners, we must say that every expenditure from the Consolidated Fund of India requires approval of Parliament, and because that's a public money that needs to be audited, we need to know how the money was spent. Sheshji, you have given a lot of examples that these are the issues that need to be audited. You have given a detailed kind of manifesto for the CAG to work on. Can you please throw some light on the areas that you wish the CAG should have been auditing?
See, there are at least 10 to 15 major schemes called centrally sponsored schemes, where the government contributes major portion of expenditure, often going up to 90%. And the expenditure is more than 10,000 crores per annum. These are all social sector, social welfare schemes, employment generation schemes, health schemes, so many health sector schemes. So many schemes are there. But these are seldom nowadays, at least for the last 7-8 years, not been subjected to all India performance audits. See, what they have now coined is a term called outcome audit. See, this is restricting the scope of earlier scope or authorized scope of CAG for all India performance audits, where not only the guidelines behind the scheme, the background of the scheme, the assumptions and the principles that went into the framing of scheme, the operation of the scheme, the responsibility of the central government also could be questioned, could be examined, questioned if those assumptions, something has gone wrong or what improvements can be made. That sort of approach was possible in the All India performance audits. Nowadays, what is happening is we are seeing only what are called outcomes. That is the initiative of one of the recent CAGs. So the outcomes now restrict the scope of CAG's audit very much. That is number one.
That's very serious. Please go ahead.
Number two, there are other schemes which are more challenging, more important, more significant from the perspective of public accountability and governance, good governance. You can see, I'll give you 2-3 examples. For example, the social and economic cost of judicial delays, the efficiency of renewable energy rollout. See, the entire MSME ecosystem is suffering from so many difficulties. Though the government projects very laudatory statistics about employment and all that, but they are mostly estimated, not evaluated by any third-party independent agencies. See, I can give you a lot of examples. And then the company, IT, information technology, where CAG is a stalwart in international field, IT audits. We could have examined the GST architecture more detailed way. We could have examined the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, the MCA 21, the portal, how frequently it used to collapse, how frequently it used to be rectified, how it impacted the good governance and the corporate governance. And there are other areas which I have mentioned where CAG has not been given authority to audit. For example, the regulatory matters. For example, it could be SEBI, it could be National Medical Commission. These areas are beyond CAG's perspective. So let us forget about areas which are beyond CAG's perspective, scope. Others areas where they are available, he should take up, instead of these normal bread and butter simple outcome audits, he should take up real challenging, innovative audits under All India performance methodology and bring out some valid recommendations and very timely, not after 3 years or 4 years of the scheme is performing. This is my view.
True. Quite an exhaustive scope that the CAG should be auditing. And as CAG has said that CAG has confined to outcome audit. So let's break this technical jargon. There are performance audits, there are outcome audits. And to give an example, the last widely known and read outcome of the CAG audit was on MGNREGA, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, which revealed that the money of the people's taxpayers' money was spent on digging wells on paper and even filling the wells on paper. So, and Sreshji Jairam Ramesh was the Union Minister for Rural Development, and he had held one conference at Vigyan Bhavan, and he was very surprised to see women coming from villages with heavy gold ornaments, wearing them in the conference. And he was somehow hinting that this scheme has some problem, real serious problems. So, Sreshji, can you please illuminate why should we thoroughly audit such social sector schemes?
My emphasis in the book is that is the first priority. That is if I may use the word in the CAG's auditing parlance, the highest risk area for CAG. And it must be subject to all India performance audits. You see, outcomes state-wise, yes, you should find out what is happening in the ground. But for that, the government has its own, at its disposal, the entire machinery of the consultants or the agencies which can do such evaluation more professionally across the country. But CAG's analysis will give a little more weight, independence, objectivity, and transparency, acceptability. That is what CAG will bring. But the problem with CAG is he is now abandoning perhaps all India performance audits in the way they used to be. So it is restricted to only those states. I am told by many senior officers, serving officers also, that the performance audits or rather outcome audits are now being restricted to more to the states where which are ruled by non-ruling party, that's the opposition parties, and they are examining the outcomes in those states much more vigorously perhaps than other states. I don't know how far this is true, but since it has come from serving officers, I take it on face value. And number two, what I have been saying is it should be an all India performance audit. The central government ministry who frames the scheme and spends trillions of rupees on this scheme, it cannot wash away its hands saying the problem is in the implementation and outcomes, and I blame the state government of the implementing agency. Then first of all, why did you design that scheme with such defective implementation mechanism? See, what are you doing? How many review meetings have you taken? How many meetings at the level of how many times the secretary or joint secretary concerned has visited states? And what is the results of those review? What improvements have been brought about? Who examines these questions? The secretaries, joint secretaries may be sitting in their own air-conditioned rooms in the government setup, and maybe taking only a video conferencing, or maybe going once in a while to some areas and may not be following up. We don't know. These areas should be brought out by CAG, and CAG's report would add weight to the recommendations, and the improvements can follow from such recommendations. That is my request.
That is true, because in the past, we have seen in Bihar that it was all because of the CAG's audit that we got to know that buffaloes were being carried on a scooty and motorcycle. So that is the scope of the loot of public money which can be done, and the risk therein. So that brings me to the question, says Ji, about the independence of institution. Why the CAG needs to be independent, and how the independence can be ensured when the appointment of the CAG is done by the Prime Minister or the government.
See, this is a wonderful question. In fact, very valid, very important, very significant question, on which a number of public interest litigations are also pending before no less than the Supreme Court. See, on paper, CAG is appointed, yes, definitely, by the Prime Minister ultimately, selected by the Prime Minister and approved by the President of India. This is the mechanism going on for the last maybe 75 years. See, that is how CAG has been appointed. So, and this appointment has been questioned on grounds of conflict of interest also. In the case of one CAG, Shashikant Sharma. Shashikant Sharma ji, he was a defense secretary. He became CAG. So somebody filed in the PIL, no less than very important persons. The case law is available in my book. I have quoted that. So they questioned about conflict of interest, that he should not have been appointed. But the Supreme Court had the matter went to High Court, went up to Supreme Court. Supreme Court said no. See, as long as one cannot find some problem with the individual's past or performance, or his official capabilities, they don't want to interfere with the process of appointment. So they were satisfied, and they, in the case of conflict of interest, since you asked the question of independence, they gave a very interesting solution. The Supreme Court, they invented what is called the doctrine of necessity. They said that in case some significant items or subjects of where the defense secretary had participated in decision making or decided on some matters, and that is going to be the subject of audit, then he could recuse himself, and he could ask the next senior most deputy CAG or somebody to see the report and approve the report. So this was a band-aid type of a solution that Supreme Court provided. But the second solution is actually not practical. No, the CAG is a single person-driven institution. There is no second alternative to CAG, and deputy CAG cannot substitute CAG and cannot sign reports under the Constitution. So that remained non-functional, that doctrine of necessity. Now comes the question of independence in the other ways. See, CAG appointment for the 75 years is proceeding as per the existing procedure. No change has been made. Now, once appointed, nothing prevents the CAG to be as independent as he wants, as he has got all security of all tenure, payment, position, budgets, everything is there with him. Even scope, manner, extent of audit. So no, he is not an officer of parliament. He is not an officer of the executive. He doesn't have to report to President of India or Prime Minister. He doesn't have to report to Supreme Court. So he has all the independence. The problem comes in the person who is appointed as CAG. Now, if that person chooses to be, or if I may use the word, emboldened, rather, he wants to remain grateful to the appointing authority for having appointed him as CAG, and doesn't want to touch any areas where the government may feel sensitive about, then that is entirely up to that individual. But it is a department of nearly 30,000-40,000 people, and it has got about 13 very senior IAS officers in the senior management, who are no less than special secretary level. And so all these officers should stand up to the CAG and advise him, guide him, and tell him that these are the areas. But unfortunately, the senior management is now very top heavy. Many serving officers have said, retired officers have been lamenting. So the senior management should be effective, and they are not effective. Naturally, no senior management has more than 1 or 2 years of service at their disposal. So they are naturally inclined to think about what happens after my retirement. So why should this upset the apple cart? So they will go along. But all this, having said all this, let me also say that the present CAG, who took over in November 2024, has tried to introduce a few new initiatives. For example, the recent press conference of the two deputy CAGs, for the first time in my memory, as I said, to explain what is the strategy approach of CAG going to be on various areas of audit or methods of audit. Number two, he has also introduced some MOUs, Memorandum of Understanding with Institute of Technology, Institutes of Management, Institute of Chartered Accountants, Institute of Public Auditors, and so many institutions to improve and strengthen the audit methodologies and audit processes and procedures and train the auditors in modern auditing methodologies. So I feel it all depends on the individual who occupies the seat of CAG, and he takes some time to understand the environment and the requirements, the precedents and pulls and pressures. Even now, another PIL is filed before Supreme Court against the appointment of the present CAG also. So this is the tough environment under which the CAG operates. But as I said earlier, let me conclude by saying, it's up to the CAG. If he wants to be independent, he has all the powers, all the facilities, all the conveniences to make him as independent as he can be.
But that remains an individual choice, that a person can decide to be independent, a person can decide to compromise his independence as per his inclinations. Sheshji, lastly, you have mentioned in the book that the CAG could have audited the rollout of the GST. And the people can relate to this since Prime Minister Narendra Modi, from the ramparts of the Red Fort, announced that he would be unveiling by Diwali, upcoming Diwali, the next generation GST. Had the CAG audited, would the government have the benefit of the insight, a neutral insight to work on, rather than now outreaching to the economists to find out what should be done with the next generation GST?
Very, very significant, very important question. See, goods and service tax, GST, CAG has audited almost at least 5-6 times in the last 7-8 years and come up with reports. It's not that CAG has not audited, number one. Number two, CAG has come out with many recommendations based on his own audits. He has pointed out major abuses of the system. For example, the input tax credit, how it is being misused, refunds of GST, how it is misused, even simple registration of multiple GST numbers, the bogus GST numbers, mismatch of GST returns. And so many things he has pointed out. The only thing is he has done in a very limited way, perhaps not going to the root cause of every problem. He has pointed out what he has found, and the trend in the CAG has all along been, what is the revenue impact? What is the monetary value? So they attribute some monetary value, 200 crores, 300 crores. Recent report of number 12 of 2025 says 800 crores. So this is how the reports have been tuned. But separately, I understand the deputy CAGs have written to the finance secretary, pointing out these defects and these abuses particularly, and they have been appreciated. There have been letters of appreciation received by CAG, which is independent of CAG's audit reports. Public accounts committees have also been discussing these. They are also giving recommendations. So it's not that CAG has not done any audit of GST, but one major problem with GST audit is the GST model law had proposed that CAG should have access to the taxpayer records, of course, through the mechanism of the department. But in the final law, that provision has been deleted, thinking that CAG has adequate access. But the practitioners of GST audit in CAG tell me clearly that, this is a major handicap, and that is what is preventing CAG for going into the root cause analysis. For example, tallying the taxpayers' accounting records, income tax records, and with the GST returns, and then come out with specific areas which require plugging. No, that gap has to be fulfilled, has to be removed. But that nobody is giving priority to that. Coming to your question, yes, the GST Council, GST Department, they have all the wherewithal, all the technology, resources at their disposal, information at their disposal. So they are the best persons and best placed to find solutions to all these problems. But yes, the CAG needs to be a little more proactive, has to go more rather deeper into the issues with root cause analysis, with a focused IT-based audit, which they are experts at. But then access to records is also an important thing. The auditees are quite reluctant to provide records to CAG's teams. That has been the bane of CAG's audit in one way. I have mentioned it in the first book also. So it's a combination of circumstances, and CAG would be very keen to contribute his mite to improvement of GST, and he will continue to audit the GST to help unearth whatever loopholes are remaining.
Indeed, the natural inclination of the people in some section is to avoid scrutiny. But the democracy functions on checks and balances. And the CAG is an important tool of the checks and balance based democratic parliamentary democracy of India. So in that sense, the CAG is the financial conscience keeper of India, and Mr. P. Sresh Kumar is the best person to write books on the subject because he has spent several years in the institution. Thank you so much, Mr. Kumar, for talking to the Raisina Hills. And we strongly recommend the audience to read the book and benefit from Mr. Sresh Kumar's insight. Thank you so much.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.